Have you ever felt a shiver crawl up your spine for no reason at all? Like something unseen is brushing against your thoughts? Some truths are so twisted, so grim, they don't just linger. They claw their way into your mind and refuse to let go. Tonight, I've unearthed 10 scary and morbid facts that could turn your dreams into nightmares. From corpses that accuse their killers to islands whispering with the dead, this isn't for the faint of heart. So bolt your windows, dim the lights, and step with me into a void where the shadows tell stories too dark to forget. Picture this. It's 1897, a foggy night in a quiet English town. A woman's body lies crumpled in a muddy ditch, her throat carved open, her eyes frozen in terror. The townsfolk whisper her name, Tessie Hurley, but no one knows who snuffed out her life. That is, until her corpse decided to speak. When detectives dragged her husband to the scene, something impossible happened. Fresh blood began seeping from her wounds, slow and deliberate, like a finger pointing from beyond the grave. They called it cruentation, an old belief that a body could bleed anew in the presence of its killer. The investigators froze, their lanterns trembling in the mist. Was it science or something darker? Her husband's face went white, and though he swore his innocence, the villagers never looked at him the same. Step into a place where death doesn't just linger, it decorates. Deep in the Czech Republic lies the Sedlec ossuary, a chapel unlike any other. The chandelier above your head, human skulls and femurs dangling like a grim constellation, the walls lined with bones, stacked and sculpted into crosses and crests. Over 40,000 skeletons call this place home, their remains twisted into art by hands long gone. They say it began with the Black Plague, when the graveyard overflowed and a half-blind monk decided to honor the dead in the most macabre way imaginable. But there's a whisper in the air here, a legend that the soil itself is cursed, soaked in sorrow from centuries past. Visitors swear they hear it at night, a faint rustling like the bones are shifting, murmuring secrets to the dark. Imagine a frozen night in 1959, high in the Ural Mountains of Russia. 9 hikers, young, experienced, fearless, set up camp under a sky heavy with snow. Then they vanished. Days later, searchers found their tent, slashed open from the inside, abandoned in a panic. Their footprints led into the dark, and that's where the nightmare begins. When their bodies were recovered, the scene defied reason. Some had no eyes, just empty sockets staring at nothing. One girl's tongue was gone, torn out by something unknown. Their skin glowed an unnatural orange, and faint traces of radiation clung to their clothes. The Soviet report scratched its head and called it an unknown compelling force. An avalanche? A secret military test gone wrong? Or something watching from the peaks? 60 years later, the mountains still guard their secret, and the hikers' last screams echo in the silence. In the soot-choked streets of Victorian England, a mother's desperation had a price. Unwanted babies, born out of wedlock or poverty, were quietly handed over to baby farmers. Strangers paid a few coins to take them in. They promised care, a new start. But for so many, it was a death sentence. One name stands out in the shadows: Amelia Dyer. She took in hundreds of infants, their tiny hands clutching at hope, only to strangle them with tape and toss their bodies into the Thames like discarded rags. Over 400, they say, though the true number drowned with her secrets. The river gave her up when a fisherman hauled in a sodden bundle, a baby's corpse, eyes still open under the murk. Dyer was hanged for it in 1896. But the fog hides a darker truth. How many other baby farmers slipped away, their cradles still empty? In 1886, the sands of Egypt parted to reveal a secret no one was ready for. Archaeologists pried open a forgotten tomb near Deir el-Bahri, and there he was, unknown man-e, a mummy unlike any other. His jaw gaped wide, locked in a silent scream that's echoed for 3,000 years. His hands clawed at the wrappings, his face twisted in a rictus of pure torment. Experts say he might have been buried alive, poisoned perhaps, his lungs burning as the sarcophagus sealed shut. Was he a royal traitor, condemned by a vengeful court? His body says yes, preserved in agony, as if time itself refused to let him rest. Those who've stood before him swear his hollow eyes follow you, his scream trapped just beneath the surface, waiting to be heard. Imagine you're tearing into an old wall, and you hear it, a frantic squeaking, a scuffle of claws. Then you see it, a knot of rats, their tails twisted and fused into a gnarled, living tangle, thrashing as one hideous thing. This is the Rat King. A nightmare stitched together by blood, dirt, and decay. For centuries, people have stumbled across them, hidden in sewers, squirming in barn lofts, especially in Germany back in the 1700s, where they pulled one free and counted 9 tails knotted like a curse. Folks whispered it was an omen, a sign of plague, or ruin creeping closer. Science argues they're just accidents, tails caught in filth until they meld. But try telling that to the medieval villagers who burned them on sight. And here's the part that sticks. Some swear they've heard that scratching in the walls, even now. Hannibal Lecter, brilliant, cultured, a predator in a silk suit, sprang from the mind of Thomas Harris. But what if I told you his roots dig into real soil? Meet Alfredo Bali Trevino, a Mexican surgeon with a scalpel as steady as his gaze. In 1959, he lured his lover, Jesus Castillo Rangel, into a trap, slashed his throat in a fit of rage, then carved him apart with surgical precision. The pieces? Packed into a box so small it baffled police. Some kept close, like dark mementos of his control. When Harris, a young journalist, met him in a Monterey prison in 1963, Trevino's polished charm masked the monster beneath. He spoke with an eerie calm, elegant, inquisitive, probing Harris's mind while the guards shifted uneasily. Even behind bars, his presence iced the air, a living blueprint for the cannibal we'd come to fear. November 1872. The Atlantic stretches cold and endless when a merchant ship, the DEI Gratia, spots something adrift, a brigantine slicing through the waves with no soul aboard. It's the Mary Celeste, her sails tattered but set, her helm abandoned. The crew who boards her finds a stillness that bites deeper than the wind. The captain's log stops mid-sentence, dated 10 days earlier. Plates of food sit uneaten, a pot of coffee still warm on the stove. Barrels of alcohol, her cargo, stand untouched, not a splinter out of place. No blood, no lifeboats, no sign of the 10 people who called her home. Just the ship, creaking like a coffin, adrift on the tide. Pirates? A rogue storm. Some whisper. The sea itself claimed them, swallowed them whole without a ripple. To this day, the Mary Celeste sails in silence, her secret locked beneath the waves. Off the sun-bleached coast of Crete lies a speck of land called Spinalonga, a fortress turned exile in the early 1900s. Here, lepers were banished, torn from their families, and dumped on this rocky shore to rot. Society called it mercy, they called it a cage. Yet in their exile, they carved out a life, bakeries, homes, even a church rose from the dust. But every stone tells another story, a graveyard sprawling beneath their feet, where hope crumbled with their bodies. The colony shut down in 1957, left to the wind and waves. Now, Visitors tread its ruins and pause because something lingers. They hear it, footsteps pacing empty streets, faint cries weaving through the walls. The lepers are gone, but Spinalonga still holds their shadows, restless and trapped in the silence. Nature hides its own horrors, and few are as vile as the Amorphophallus titanum, the corpse flower. Tucked in the jungles of Sumatra, this giant blooms once every few years, unfurling petals the color of bruised flesh. But it's not the sight that stops you, it's the smell. A stench like rotting meat spills out, thick and choking, a perfume crafted to lure flies and beetles to its core. Imagine it. A crowd gathers in a greenhouse, noses wrinkled, as this thing, towering up to 10 feet, breathes decay into the air. They wait hours for the bloom, only to gag and scatter. Some say it's nature's prank, others call it a warning, a reminder that even beauty can mask something rancid. Next time you smell something off in the dark, maybe it's closer than you think.